Welcome everyone to the Career Resiliency in the Job Search Workshop. My name is Jennifer Rhodes. I'm one of the career advisors here on the WGU CPD team. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. So everyone should automatically be placed on mute. If you do have any questions throughout or comments, please feel free to put those in the chat as I will be monitoring those. And I also have my colleague, Shantae, that will also be assisting with monitoring and responding. So please share any questions or feedback in the chat. Also, everyone that has RSVP for this is going to be sent a copy of this recording. So if you have that, or if you have RSVP, you will be sent a copy of this recording within 2 business days, so you'll be able to access that. And it looks like Shantae did a little greeting in here too. So Shantae is my wonderful colleague, and I appreciate her ability to be able to assist with some of the chat and comments today. And before we get started, I do like to get to know my audience a little bit more. So if you could type in and let me know what discipline you're from, whether it's IT, business, education, healthcare, as well as what particularly interested you about the session, or what caused you to want to really join and hear more about this topic. Looks like we have business, practical tools for the job hunt. So this workshop is a little bit different, and I just want to mention that you will get some tips kind of generally about the job search, but this is really also about mindset and how to maintain positivity and wellness throughout some of the challenges that you face with the job search, if you will. So it's a little bit of a different kind of workshop. Hopefully you'll find the tips helpful for that. And it looks like we have nursing, we have displaced IT professional of 27 years. Sounds like quite the longevity, but this also provides you with some opportunity, Robert, to take a look and see what next steps you might want to take. Business actively searching and a lot of ghosting or rejections. Yes, that can be very frustrating for sure. Amanda, looking to change careers, trying to learn to stay positive. Outstanding. It sounds like, from the comments that you're making, that this material will be directly relevant to you. Just a little bit more about myself and my background before we get started. So I've been with WGU for about 4 years now. Prior to this role, I worked at Arizona State, worked with students from all different experience levels, first-time freshmen, career changers, PhD postdocs, folks that are seasoned, that were experiencing reduction in force. So at that time, I really had the great opportunity to get a lot of solid experience related to career development. And I've been able to bring that forward into this role here at WGU. I am coming to you from a little town in Pennsylvania right now, in between Erie and Pittsburgh. If anybody's familiar with the area, it's called Conneaut Lake. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, so I get to spend part of the year in PA and a great deal of the year in Tempe, Arizona, where I still have my place. So the weather here in Pennsylvania is getting cold and cloudy. We're calling for some snow on Halloween tomorrow. Getting really anxious to get back to Arizona soon, so hopefully that happens. But part of my training, I have a master's in counseling, and so part of my training in special interest has to do with social emotional learning, SEL, EQ. So I'm fortunate in my current role that I get to infuse some of those concepts into workshops like this. Imposter syndrome is another one. Mindfulness and gratitude in the workplace is another one that I do, where I'm really able to infuse some of those concepts. So that's what this workshop really focuses on today is, again, maintaining positivity and wellness when you experiencing some setbacks or challenges, and how to really put into practice some techniques to help you with all of this. So I hope that you find this helpful. And for those of you just joining us, welcome. Glad you could join us today. And just so you know, once again, everybody's placed on mute. And if you have a question or comment, we ask you to put that here in the chat, and we will monitor those as we go through. And everyone that has RSVP for this session will be sent a copy of the recording within typically about 2 business days. So you will be able to go back through this content. I also send the PowerPoint with my presentations. This one in particular, because this is a little bit content heavy. So it's good to go back and be able to review some of the concepts that we talk about today. So there was a little bit more about me. Okay. So we're going to, first of all, start off with a definition of resiliency. We hear this term all the time, especially since I would say COVID. It's really been prevalent, where we've really had a lot of us have experienced unprecedented challenges. And so, how do we take that information and those experiences, learn from them, be able to move forward with what has occurred, and be able to a lot of times become stronger, especially with recent events in the last week. Even this is a term that is in dire need, and we really need to think of techniques to be able to maintain and develop this resiliency. So we will start out with a definition. We will talk about different dimensions that are related to resiliency to consider overall. Then we will talk about a framework that I developed called Ground that helps you remember some of these key concepts when it comes to ways to maintain resiliency during the job search specifically and career development. Then we will have some next steps for you. I do like to do 30-day challenges in my webinars where essentially I ask folks to commit to 2 to 3 actions that they're willing to take within the next 30 days to help to really keep this material active. Because I think a lot of us can relate to, we attend a professional development workshop or some kind of training, and we say, hey, that was really good content. Then we go back to our day-to-day lives. That content kind of falls by the wayside. And then we attend another training and that happens. And so I do like to try to put into practice a little bit of a pattern to allow you to put this material to work right away, hopefully. So we'll talk about that at the end, and we will have a Q&A period as well, as time allots. So resiliency really has to do with bouncing back from challenges, right? This is what we get into when we start to talk about this. So to set the stage for this workshop, I ask everyone to take a moment and think of a time when you were resilient. And this can be, you know, in the context of job search, academics, or even outside of that. This could have to do with personal events. Maybe you've had to deal with an illness or an illness of a close family member, friend, any kind of unexpected event that you had that occurred, or maybe it was even something you were planning for. Maybe someone passed away and you knew ahead of time, and you had to develop some resiliency there. So think of a time when you were resilient. Think about what was the situation and what actions did you specifically take? Also, what do you believe allowed you to be resilient in that situation? So when we talk about what allowed you to be resilient in the situation, was it your faith? Was it prior situations that helped you to become more resilient and recalling those? Was it reaching out to family and friends? Think about the actions you took that help you to be resilient, and what factors were involved and related to that. A lot of times with resiliency, when we can think of a prior time when we were able to persevere, that can help us with future resiliency. So, does anyone in the chat want to, excuse me, share anything about these questions that I just mentioned about thinking of a time when you're resilient? What actions did you take? And what do you believe allowed you to be resilient in the situation? Seeing if anybody would like to share anything in the chat there. And when I've done this in the past, sometimes people just share the factors that they thought helped them to be resilient. And that's excellent too. For some folks, even with the when it's related to job search, maybe it was taking a break for a little bit from the job search. Regular breaks are important to be able to stay on top of things and to, again, kind of give yourself a mental health break from all of that. Nope, the PowerPoint wanted to jump ahead of me here, so I don't currently see any feedback coming through, and that's fine. Just thinking about and jotting down some ideas that come to you about a time when you were resilient. What are the actions you took, and what do you believe allowed you to be resilient in that situation? Okay, we did have comments. So Robert says, confidence that I can navigate the issue and come up with a solution helped me to move forward. Excellent. And Robert, what do you think the confidence was due to, the prior confidence? Sometimes people will say, it was prior um, challenges that I had to face and navigate to build up that confidence in that situation. So drawing upon former situations can definitely help us to be more resilient. So excellent. So getting into the definition here. So Robert says, my experience in having seen others do the same. Excellent. So another contributing factor to resilience sometimes is looking and seeing who inspires us, who has been through a great amount of challenge and seeing how they have persevered, right? So that can be really important. We just had a featured guest speaker in one of our employee interest groups, Ohm for Wellness, that I'm a part of, and she's a WGU alum, and she has stage 4 cancer and has, I think, 3 or 4 children. And she is just such a model of resiliency. She faced the death of an infant. She has had all these treatments and still has such a bright light about her and positivity that she really inspires me when hearing stories from folks like that. So yes, definitely seeing others navigate that can be very helpful. So as you see here, here's the definitions. Resilience is that quality that allows some people to be knocked down by life and come back stronger than ever. Resilience is best understood as a process. So process is a key word here. A lot of times when we are in the midst of a challenge, whether it be job loss or facing repetitive rejections on job applications, what have you, it's very hard when we're in the moment to take a step back, analyze what's really going on, process it, and then to become resilient. It typically takes some time, and it's a process of things like acknowledging what we see happening, what's tangibly in front of us, reviewing our thoughts, our feelings, actually feeling our feelings and processing those, giving them a name, being able to take away from the challenge something that can be helpful to us, and then being able to move forward. So this word of process is really important when we're looking at resiliency. Again, it's not something, I'm sure we all wish we could do this sometimes, snap our fingers and, hey, we feel resilient, right? Or we are more resilient. Typically is a process of looking at multiple factors. And folks that are resilient find a way to rise from the ashes. So once again, if you think of people that you admire who are particularly resilient, they have an amazing story usually, and they have been able to rise from incredible odds. One of the most profound, I would say, resilient people that I've ever read about, and I'm just going to put her name in the chat in case you're curious. Her name is Dr. Edith, and she goes by Edie. Dr. Edith Edie Eger. And she was in the concentration camps at 16, where her parents were unfortunately killed And the next day, she was forced to, she was a ballerina, and she was forced to dance for Joseph Mengele. Uh, and she survived the camps. She is 95 to this day and is a practicing psychologist and is absolutely amazing. So if you love stories of resiliency like I do, that's one of the stories that I remember all the time when I go through thinking about resiliency and challenges. So yeah, her story is absolutely incredible. She's written a few different books and again, still alive. I believe she's 95 or 96. Her older sister lived to be about 97 and just passed away in the past year. So incredible resiliency. So talking about the factors that are involved in resiliency, there are the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. So this goes into when we talked about resiliency being a process and examining the different factors. So when we talk about physical resiliency, this can have to do with, especially if you have an illness that you're facing. So flexibility, your endurance, your strength. And as we know, if we're taking care of ourselves properly, getting enough exercise, eating nutritious food, actually drinking enough water, which for a lot of us is a challenge, this all plays into the physical resiliency. Then we have the emotional resiliency, which is a very big part, and probably a lot of what we think of when we imagine resiliency. So, what is our emotional range and flexibility? When we are faced with a challenge, are we, folks that kind of shy away from challenges and say, I can't, or not today? Or do we say, you know what am I going to learn from this challenge? How is this going to make me a better person? How can I stay positive in the face of unexpected events and regulate my emotions? This is also where relationships come into play. Your connections with others are under the emotional part of resiliency. Then there is the spiritual aspect. This is the commitment to core values. This is where a lot of us may call on a higher power when we are feeling, hopeless or helpless. This also involves the flexibility and tolerance of others' values and beliefs to be ultimately resilient. And intuition can play a part in this as well. Then we go into the mental aspects, another very common area of resiliency. This can involve things like attention span. In this day and age, there are so many competitors, if you will, for our attention with instant communication, this pace of technology, trying to, a lot of you are students caring for family members, working full time. There's so much of this that's competing for your attention. So mental flexibility is key to this. Are we able to switch gears when we need to? Are we able to be in the present moment as much as possible? Maintaining an optimistic worldview in extremely challenging times and being able to incorporate multiple points of view that may be different from our own. So coherence of resiliency involves incorporating the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual to move forward. So in a nutshell, resiliency is the ability to, as we said, like bounce back from challenges, face difficult challenges and still find meaning, especially the meaning behind the challenge, which again, we go back to that word of process. It is extremely challenging to be able to see a meaning in a difficulty in the moment. It's also responding positively to difficult situations. I'm sure a lot of you hear about growth mindset all the time, right? And there's a related concept to growth mindset in the inner defender, the inner critic, and the inner guide. So the inner defender is that voice inside of us when we face adversity and difficult situations that says, it's not my fault, right? That person should have been doing their job better. Or if they would have trained me better, this wouldn't have happened. Or those people never know what they're doing, right? It's kind of pointing the finger on everyone around you. The inner critic is the one that is blaming ourselves all the time. I think of imposter syndrome when I think of this inner critic of, you always mess up. You're never good enough, right? You always are making mistakes. You need to step up your game. That's the inner critic voice. The inner guide voice is the one that says, hey, when we receive feedback or we experience adversity or challenging events, do we say, what can I learn from this? Or I might feel uncomfortable right now, but what can I take from this and move forward? What's the positive in this situation? So a lot of this will tap into that growth mindset as well. It's your ability to cope when things are challenging, look bleak. A lot of times, I teach courses for the Arizona community colleges as well. And a lot of times when I work with my students, they talk about their ability to be resilient honestly has to do with tapping into others. So knowing that they have children that are watching them, that they're looking for a positive role model, that's a big motivator and a big element of resilience for a lot of the students that I talk about or that I talk to. Tapping into hope, that could be your higher spiritual power, whatever really helps you to feel hopeful. Being able to transform unfavorable situations into wisdom or even compassion over time. And honestly, it's the ability to endure challenging situations. Factors that make someone resilient. We were talking about earlier that situation that we asked you to think of when you were resilient, and what were the factors related to that? Confidence, as someone mentioned earlier in the presentation, is important. Social support, adaptability, right? Being able to shift gears when needed. I think there's even a common saying that says, success in life is not being able to face the wind, but adjust your sails. Purposefulness, and then through, as we mentioned earlier, using a growth mindset, thinking of ways to cultivate optimism by looking at the positive aspects of what happened to us, or what are the gifts in these challenges. Being able to regulate your emotions, and again, seeing either negative feedback, constructive criticism, or failure as a form of helpful feedback. Can you transport that? Can you translate that into something that's going to be more helpful? So resiliency is important because it keeps us on track to achieve our goals, regardless of setbacks or problems that we may experience. Also, these factors that are related to resiliency are, according to a couple of researchers, Carrie Cooper, Jill Flint Taylor, and Michael Pern, have come up with these elements. So you can boost your resilience, ensure that you'll succeed by focusing on these areas, no matter how many failures you experience. You can help to protect and grow your resiliency by looking after your health and well-being, building those support networks, and changing your thinking from negative to positive is what we were looking for in a summary here. So the next part of this has to do with a framework that I developed in terms of career resiliency. And there is this acronym that, as you see, formulates the word ground. We're going to go into each of these in more detail, but briefly, G stands for gather, and this is going to relate to gathering job search materials, career satisfaction elements. R stands for review. This has to do with factors important to you related to the next step in your career. Have you reviewed your values, the interests that you have, your skills that you enjoy using, your challenges? Have you thought about all of these things and reviewed them? O has to do with optimize, and this we're relating to self-care. Are you optimizing the key elements of self-care? U has to do with understanding, and there's a lot to be said about this particular element, the U, and it has a lot to do with your mindset. Then N is networking. So networking with professionals, friends, and family. And then finally, D is for document. Are you stopping and writing down your successes, your areas for improvement? Are you documenting everything that you're observing and experiencing to help you to be more resilient? So again, starting with the G, gather. Have you stopped and reflected upon your professional brand, for example? While considering what you do, why you do what you do, or your why, how you want to be known by others consistently in a professional setting, and what sets you apart from others in your field? Have you appropriately communicated your professional brand through your LinkedIn profile? Have you recently updated your resume and or cover letter to reflect your professional brand and skills? Have you polished your interviewing skills? Our department provides assistance with LinkedIn profile reviews by email, resume cover letter reviews also by email, and assistance with mock interviews by appointment. You may also obtain additional assistance with interview preparation by using, through the handshake system, we have an excellent online platform called Big Interview, which allows you to practice interview questions from your discipline in real time. You can record your responses and even play those back to yourself. So this is important. This first step is, have you gathered your application materials? Especially if you are making a career pivot. Have you a sense of the kinds of job targets you're going for, what those keywords are that they're asking for? Have you updated your materials to reflect those? Um, has it been a while since you've done an interview? Do you need to practice? Have you researched companies and positions of interest? These are all important elements for career resiliency because you need to have a pretty solid starting point and also those materials to support your starting point. So that's where the G comes into play here in the acronym. So the next one is review. So for this one, you want to review your skills and interests and skills, or excuse me, values, interests, and skills and how they lead with your strengths and connect to what you're looking for. It might also be a good practice to make a list of must-haves or preferences. So for this, especially those folks, I talk to a lot of students that are obtaining some pretty versatile degrees from us. So whether it's the bachelor's in business management, whether it is the MBA, for example, a lot of times folks are saying, you know what, I'm really looking to move up in my career, but I don't know what direction I want to go. And so we start to talk about, do you want to supervise people? Have you developed any supervisor experience in the past? And sometimes they'll say, I don't have the formal title, but I help to train others. And then we might ask, okay, what are some other criteria that you're looking at? And a lot of times I get a big pause there, right? Or I get some uncertainty. And I understand because again, these degrees are extremely versatile and they allow you to go into many different areas of business. But at the same time, you want to have some parameters to work off of. So creating a list of must-haves, maybe there's a minimum salary that you need to work off of. If must-haves feels too restrictive, maybe you do a list of must-haves slash preferences. Maybe you prefer a remote role. Maybe you prefer a role that allows for you to travel a little bit. Maybe you have a preference to provide trainings to others, but maybe it doesn't have to be a day-to-day function of your job. So creating this list of must-haves and preferences can help to give you more focus. And we have a couple of career guides that can be very helpful for you. The career exploration guide off of our website can be of particular assistance when defining some of these criteria that are important to you. So that would be one in particular that I would work with and see how this plays out for you if you don't have a solid grasp on some of these elements. Past career goals and achievements. A lot of times when you're looking at that next step and building the ground for resiliency, it's helpful to pause and think about, what have I enjoyed the most in the work that I've done in the past? What have I done? What have I not enjoyed? This can be just as important when determining that next step. What are the achievements that you're most proud of in your work that you've done? Think about professionals who you admire. A nice exercise related to this are, what are 5 words that you would use to describe these individuals? Maybe One of them, this is kind of more than a single word, but maybe it's servant leader. Maybe it's compassionate. Maybe it's, and we'll use phrases here. Maybe it's firm but fair. Maybe it is self-starter. So thinking about keywords that relate to professionals who you admire can also help you to get more in tune of how you would like to grow as a professional. Factors that help keep you motivated. What's your why? Why do you do what you do? For example, I talk about to a number of students who are going into more healthcare administrative roles that maybe served in direct patient care or bedside positions. And a lot of times they'll talk about wanting to help to streamline the processes when it comes to, the administrative functions of healthcare. There are so many challenges related to that. And so they might say, I want to be one of the people that helps to spearhead and streamline more of those processes. Or maybe they had a family member that had to go through all of that and they feel really personally invested on helping to make that process easier for others. So thinking about what are those factors that help to keep you motivated and what's your why? If you can work from a foundation of your values and what's important to you, that can honestly help you to be resilient through many situations. You can use this as your compass in terms of what steps that you will make in your career and why. And when you experience a setback, you can go back to your why. And that a lot of times can help to keep you motivated. So we talked about the G and the R. So in O, we have optimize. So for this, I really relate this to self-care, especially when you are in active job searching mode. I think of a student that I've worked with who has his master's in leadership. And this particular student used to work in higher education, and he transitioned to a project manager role in the tech industry. And unfortunately, he experienced, I think it was 3 layoffs in 2 years. And as you can imagine, he was extremely, stressed, and his resiliency was very much being tested. And this particular graduate was excellent of staying on top of LinkedIn, networking on a weekly basis, looking for new opportunities. He was really, really good at following through with all the steps that we recommend. The one area he had challenge with was taking regular breaks. So he was not working anywhere, so his job search was essentially his full-time job, and he was helping to care for elderly parents in their homes. So he had a lot to balance. So it really is important to schedule regular breaks within your time, especially if any of you are like again still going to school, trying to do the job search or internship search, taking care of a family, scheduling in a couple of hours a day, whether it's for exercise, to meditate, whatever it is, it's really important to put these breaks in there. And to also keep a regular schedule. If you're unemployed, that's important to try to keep a routine schedule to give you, some sense of control and also familiarity. Making sure, again, you're taking care of the physical, mental, and spiritual. It sounds really straightforward, but it can really throw off your wellness if any of those elements are not in balance. So making sure that you're being mindful and scheduling time to take care of all of these and obtaining feedback. So, if others are telling you, those that are close to you saying, you know what, you look really worn out, you need to take some time out, being open to some of those suggestions and making some changes to your self-care. The next element has to do with your mindset. So this is a really big area, and again, there's a lot of content related to this. This is where I think it's really important that you have a copy of this PowerPoint so you can go back and review some of this. Because again, I know there's a lot of content in this particular letter, um, but it is very important because it can really be powerful. So for this, we refer to what we call understanding. This has to do with your mindset. So like when someone mentioned applying for, gosh, dozens of positions, maybe hundreds of positions, getting ghosted, not hearing back, that can really wear on your motivation. And for some, that does trigger imposter syndrome feelings and thoughts. So the mindset is huge. It It is very powerful when you are able to take a step back, reflect on what's happening, and then be able to move forward with some more balanced thoughts that help you. And helpful is keyword here. It's so easy for us to say something like, maybe you're actively in the job search. I know we're heading into November, December. And so some folks get concerned because they say, you know what, I've heard that in some industries, hiring slows down around the holidays. That can be the fact for some, but not all across the board. And there are so many factors that are involved in job searching that it's really important to keep in mind what you can control. So it isn't helpful for you to say, for example, oh my gosh, November 1st is this week. I have to get a job by the holidays, or I don't see how I'm going to go on. That is not a helpful thought, right? You might be feeling that and you might be able to need to process some of that anxiety, but it's a matter of taking a step back and again, looking at what we call cognitive distortions, which we're going to look at in our next slide here, and really looking at that negative self-talk. Because when it comes to working with employers and recruiters, for example, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over their actions. We can, in some cases, follow up with a job application that was submitted. Usually we recommend waiting about 2 weeks from the time the position closed or 2 weeks from the last time you corresponded with them. That's kind of just a general tip to follow up. But if we don't hear back later, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do. So we have to be able to distinguish between what we can and cannot control, and then work with some of these cognitive distortions and self-talk. Also, questions to ask yourself for feedback. So when you're not hearing back from a recruiter or employer, is it, you know, correct to say, oh, I have no qualifications that they're looking for. I'm not a valuable professional. That's probably not the message, right? You don't know the strength of the pool that they're working with. There are so many factors behind the scenes that unfortunately you're not aware of. So asking yourself, checking in for questions that you can kind of speak to yourself about. And again, that's going to get into the cognitive distortions here in a moment. Questions to ask yourself to maintain a positive perspective. Once again, that's going to relate to our next slide here. And ways to promote positive view during times of uncertainty. So in understanding, these are the points that we are trying to promote. Positive mindset. We are not talking about toxic positivity, by the way, which is essentially where you shut down all feelings and thoughts that might be perceived as negative. This is more an act of recognizing truly what's happening, processing your thoughts and feelings, feeling those emotions, then being able to move forward and take some positive messages from that. So just want to clarify that. You actually do want to go through the thoughts and feelings, but then be able to move forward. And then also being able to keep things in context. So cognitive distortions, these are also covered in the imposter syndrome workshop. So for this, I don't know if these look familiar to any of you, but these are very important thoughts to check in about. If you haven't done this before, and let's say you're actively job searching, or maybe you're even dealing with a work environment that is not conducive to your growth, or maybe even seems downright toxic. The best way to work with these situations is to really look at what you can and cannot control. I know that's easier said than done, but a way to determine this is to check in with some of these cognitive distortions. So if you've never done this before, I recommend that you start to monitor your automatic thoughts as they relate to your job search. So start to, and I mean even writing down, like let's say you get a rejection letter or notice from a position that you really wanted. Your automatic thoughts might be, I'm never going to find a job, or um, they think I'm incompetent, or my application materials were horrendous. Then I encourage you to write down your feelings related to those thoughts. So a lot of times it might be, you know, depression, anxiety, frustration, and you may even rate percentages for those. Okay, how anxious do I feel about this? Probably a big 70, 80%, right? How defeated do I feel? Maybe a 90%. Then we're going to show you some questions to defeat those or work with those cognitive distortions. So ask yourself these questions to check in with these distortions. Then rewrite those thoughts and re-rank your feelings. So I will show you how to do this once we get through some of these distortions. But so writing down your thoughts, documenting them, going through these cognitive distortions, rewriting, and then looking at your emotions again can be extremely powerful. This is for the understanding element. So you might recognize some of these, the all or nothing thoughts. You look at things in absolute and black and white. This is also known as polarized thinking. This type of thinking involves viewing things, as good or bad, success or failure, right? So one of your automatic thoughts, once again, might be if you're feeling frustrated in the job search, I'm always a failure. I always get rejections. That would be an example of all or nothing thinking. Or there's the overgeneralization. This happens when you make a rule after a single event or a series of coincidences. So this is related almost to the first point because the words always or never frequently appear in these statements. Because you have experience with one event playing out a certain way, you assume that all future events will have the same outcome. For example, imagine that you made a suggestion about a work project that wasn't adopted in the final project. You might overgeneralize this and assume that no one at work ever listens to you or takes you seriously, right? And that key word, that absolute word of ever is a key that's a cognitive distortion. Or a mental filter, you dwell on the negatives. So here, this is the opposite of overgeneralization, but with the same negative outcome. Instead of taking one small event and generalizing it inappropriately, the mental filter takes one small event and focuses on it exclusively, filtering out anything else. So maybe after an interview, there was one question that you couldn't answer. And so you're sitting there and you're fixating on that and saying, okay, because of that one question I didn't answer, I bombed the whole interview. That's an example of a mental filter. Discounting the positive. You insist that your accomplishments or positive qualities don't count. So we could use that interview example again, and maybe you successfully answered, 19 out of 20 questions, and you're focusing just on that negative piece. Or how many of you tend to do the jumping to conclusions here, where you assume that people are reacting negatively to you when there's no definite evidence? I remember an interview that I did for a government position once. And if any of you have been through a government type position interview, a lot of times the committee can appear to be very distant and almost sterile. And I was used to doing interviews with, colleges and universities where everybody is typically warm and friendly and really want to get to know you. And I went to this interview and I walked out of there thinking, these people hate me. you know, they think I'm incompetent, like all kinds of these thoughts came to me because again, it was kind of like poker face on their side and they didn't understand what was happening. So I was doing this mind reading and really freaking myself out when I actually did get a second interview from them afterwards. So you check in with yourself and see if you might be, you know, subscribing to some of these distortions. Or how many of you participate in fortune telling? You predict that things will turn out badly. Oh, I just know today is going to be a total wash, or I know the next week I'm not going to get any interview invites. Magnification or minimization. You blow things out of proportion or shrink their importance. So once again, this is like fixating on a negative event and really making it larger than it is in many cases. Or emotional reasoning. I don't know if any of you are guilty of this, but I feel like this interview is not going to go well. So it's not going to, or I have a bad feeling about this. I'm nervous about this. So I'm not going to get a positive result. Or if we have any shoulders out there, I should have a job by now. I should be able to at least get 5 interviews this week. A lot of times these statements are not helpful and they are cognitive distortions. Or labeling yourself. I'm incompetent. which is a horrible thing to say to yourself based on whatever thoughts you're reviewing, and asking yourself, do I speak to a friend the way I speak to myself? Be a good way to check into this. Or personalization and blame. You blame yourself for something you weren't entirely responsible for. Or on the opposite of that, you blame other people and deny your role in the problem. So that's that inner critic and inner defender that we talked a little bit about earlier. So now that you see the types of cognitive distortions that are common, these are some questions to ask yourself to help defeat some of these. How do I know this thought is accurate? When I say that I'm a failure, okay, how do I know this is accurate? What evidence do I have for this? How can I test my assumptions and beliefs to find out if they're accurate? Is there someone that's trusted in your life that you can check in about and that can maybe help you remember some of your accomplishments and strengths? Or one question that I really like is this thought helpful? Once again, if you're in active job searching mode and you feel like your time is running out and you need some income, of course, those are all understandable stressors. But is it helpful to tell yourself, well, you better find a job next week or you're going to be on the street? Chances are that is not a helpful thought to be telling yourself, right? Are there other ways that you can think about this situation or yourself? Are you blaming yourself unnecessarily? Once again, thinking back to what can you control and what can you realistically not control, or what is out of your hands? What or who else contributed to the situation? That goes again back to the what you can control and what you cannot control. Are you making assumptions? Can you look for shades of gray? Now, I know this can be especially challenging for folks that are in the job search. I talk to a number of folks that say, you know what, I was told that I was a top candidate, or I was told that I was one of two, and I haven't heard anything back in 2 weeks. Should I assume that I'm not getting the role? This is a little bit of living in that gray area, quite honestly. Because if you're a high up candidate, chances are very good you're still being considered. But there's not a guarantee. So can you live in that gray area for what's going on? Am I assuming the worst? It's human nature a lot of times to do that, right? Because of our survival instinct. But it's good to check in about this and seeing if we're doing that to then be able to transform our thoughts into more positive, productive thoughts. Am I making this personal when it isn't? Again, I hear this a lot in job search and interviews of people say, you know what, I really thought I was a top candidate for that position based on the job description, and I didn't get an interview, so I must be incompetent. There are so many factors that go on behind the scenes, as we said, in these job searches that unfortunately you don't know about. So a lot of times it isn't strictly about you and your qualifications. It can be about the strength of the pool. It can be about, unfortunately, this happens, but they might have already known who they wanted to hire and they're just going through formalities. There are many factors that go into that. So this goes back to what you can and can't control. So once again, when using this process, writing down your automatic thoughts, if you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling defeated, writing down those thoughts, the related emotions, and the percentage that you feel those emotions, whether it's anxiety, defeat, depression, frustration, what have you. Then looking at the thought, checking these cognitive distortions. So maybe you see that you are participating in the all or nothing thinking. And you're saying, again, I always get rejected. Writing down your feelings related to that, recognize the cognitive distortion, the all or nothing thinking, I always get rejected. Then thinking about times when you were successful, for example, or thinking about those things that you can control, writing down some other thoughts related to that particular situation, and then again, rating your feelings and writing down your feelings related to that. I encourage you to try this if you haven't before, because again, it can be extremely powerful when developing resiliency in all areas of the job search. And let's say you're getting feedback at work or from colleagues, what have you. Is there something in my past performance with which I am unsatisfied? So let's say you receive some feedback on a performance review that didn't feel so good or that you are concerned about. Can you think about areas that you might really need to improve upon and connect that to the feedback you received? Asking yourself the question, how can I do things better next time? Even if you don't 100% agree with the feedback that was given. You are being provided with a perception of someone else, which could be worth looking at. And what can you take from that information to move forward? What steps can you take to avoid repeating the same mistakes if maybe you did make a mistake that you're not happy about? Considering what are the skills and qualities, characteristics you need to improve to be successful. And is there someone you can reach out to for advice or support, like a mentor, a colleague, a friend, what have you? These are great questions to help you process any kind of feedback that might come up in your career that can also help you to be more resilient. Another area too, with this understanding and a note on gratitude. Gratitude is another extremely powerful process. So keeping a daily calendar of gratitude when you're experiencing challenging times, whether that be the job search or other circumstances. I honestly try to make a practice for myself to think of 3 things every day that I'm grateful for. And this has been very helpful. I also keep a gratitude jar where once a week I put on a little piece of paper. I write down one thing that happened that I'm grateful for that week. Or I'm a big fan of humor. So if something really funny happened, I write that down for that week. And then on New Year's Eve, I started doing this 2 years ago. New Year's Eve, I open those up and I relive my year with those positive, funny elements. And it's been a really great practice for me. I think it's been really rejuvenating. Um, you know, Express thankfulness for difficulties, share gratitude when you go out to eat with friends and family. Start with something positive. It's a great way to generate more positivity. Writing a letter of gratitude, especially a handwritten letter, which isn't done so much anymore. Taking that time and to do that practice can be powerful. And again, appreciate a force bigger than yourself. So whenever you can tap into some spirituality, that can also help with gratitude and understanding. So then we get to the N, the letter N in the ground acronym here. So this has to do with networking. Make a list of those who are able to assist you with the job search. You may want to tap into our LinkedIn alumni tool where you're able to locate other um, WGU students and grads that might be able to assist with your job search or with your professional development. Look into professional associations related to your discipline. On our website, we do have a list of professional associations related by discipline that you can check. And if you're a current student, just know that if you join these professional associations, like for HR, I'm thinking of SHRM, a lot of times as a student, you have a greatly discounted rate as opposed to when you graduate. So it could be, $100 as a student versus 300 once you graduate. So it's really good to look at these professional associations at this time. Also, participating in events and trainings to build your network. Joining clubs, like if any of you are in cybersecurity, there's a great cybersecurity club at WGU. Women in Tech, if we have any female students that would like to join that. Again, it's an excellent association to allow you to network. So thinking of the networking piece is really big. And even our team can be part of your network. When you're experiencing job loss or a career pivot and you need to chat with someone and just process what's happening, we can also be a part of that network. So please keep that in mind. And thank you. It looks like Shantae is putting in, I think, the appointment link. Appreciate that, as well as the other links you've been sharing there. And then the last letter here is D. So this is for document. So after you go through an interview, how many of you actually stop and write down your initial thoughts? Usually, I don't hear many people that do. They kind of process it in their mind, but they don't stop and write it down. And usually they jump to what went wrong. So what I recommend is that you try to shift that mindset and actually take the action to write or type down right after that interview. Document what went well. This helps to build resiliency and reinforces the positive in your processes. Also, keeping a kudos file of positive comments from coworkers, from clients, supervisors. This can be really helpful for you to develop career resiliency when you're going through a difficult time, or even on your LinkedIn profile, if you have recommendations, going back and reading those when you're feeling challenged can also be kind of a form of a kudos file for you and can help to reinforce that gratitude and positivity. As we said, the gratitude journal is another way to reinforce some positives and resiliency. For your job applications, do you have a system down in terms of noting? And there are several out there now that can help you to document when you applied for which position, if there was a follow-up contact, etc. I recommend at the minimum keeping an Excel spreadsheet, documenting all of that so that you can track everything. And another good practice is to save the job description that you find online, because a lot of times those positions end up being pulled after their expiration date, and then you might not have access to it after that. So it's a good idea to start documenting those actual job descriptions and saving those. Perceptions after, if you do informational interviews with folks, which is where you find a professional that you want to learn more about their career, and you ask them about how they got started, what are their greatest strengths and challenges, are there other resources they recommend that you tap into? Write down your initial impressions about those informational interviews. They're great ways to explore career paths. Maybe you find someone else who's a career changer, and maybe they were able to demonstrate some resiliency for you and getting started in a whole different segment of professionalism. So, writing down those initial impressions after an informational interview can also help to remind you what excited you about that conversation, especially. Positive affirmations, again, very powerful when you do them regularly. So, writing down statements, thinking about how do you want others to perceive you when you're not in the room? Think about that question. What are the top 3 describers you would want, or descriptions, I should say, that you want about yourself when you're not in the room? Would it be things like servant leader, driven, dedicated, data focused? Writing down, I am a dedicated servant leader um, with strong data analytical skills, something like that. That will help to build up your, again, positive thoughts in this direction. Personal goals, long and short term. Have you developed those in a SMART goal format, especially? If you have not, then that is something else that we can assist you with, by the way, defining that. And do you have a plan B? Maybe you thought you knew what you wanted to do and you're getting new information and you're going to need to make a career pivot again. Good example of this is I talk to folks that go into wanting to become certified teachers. And sometimes they get in and they do their student teaching and they say, I can't picture myself doing this for the next several years. So then it's, okay, what is your plan B? What can we talk about that you could still pursue and still feel fulfilled? So again, this ground framework, I hope you find this helpful. This has to do with gathering the materials necessary for a successful job search, reviewing the factors that are important to you, optimizing self-care, understanding your mindset, networking with others, and then documenting all information. And then I do have a little saying that I like to share here with you for how to ground yourself through mindfulness, because another great resiliency technique is being able to ground yourself in the present moment. So as you see here, it says a recipe for a mindful week: teaspoon of gratitude, generous helping of deep breaths, sprinkle of quiet moments, drizzle of self-compassion. Add a teaspoon of gratitude to the end of each day. Celebrate both your big and small wins. Sprinkle some quiet moments throughout the week and combine with generous servings of deep breaths. Finally, add a drizzle of self-compassion to all your challenges and reflect on how you can best help yourself. So next steps here, as I said, I like to institute a 30-day challenge, which approximately 30 days from today is going to be November 30th. I recommend that you write that day down and commit to 3 next steps that you're willing to take based on this information. Whether it be, I'm going to start documenting my thoughts and catching the cognitive distortions. whether it be I'm going to start a gratitude jar or a kudos file, or I'm going to make an appointment with career and professional development to formulate some SMART goals related to my career. Whatever stood out to you in this presentation, I recommend that you write down 3 next steps that you're willing to commit to. Then I would recommend who you could check in with about this. So an accountability buddy, whether that is a coworker, a supervisor, a good friend, significant other, maybe writing their name down and giving them a heads up that you're going to give yourself this 30-day challenge. That will help to keep this material more active and hopefully help you to progress with your career resiliency and your related path. So this next slide here just shows an overview of the different types of services that we offer. So everything from, as we said earlier, resume, cover letter, LinkedIn profile reviews, all done by email. You can find more information about those processes on our website there. We hold appointments on everything from career decision making to related to that, making a career pivot, to networking strategy, to mock or practice interview, and then through Handshake, you will find a lot of informational sessions with different employers that you can RSVP for. We also have that big interview preparation platform that you can find through Handshake and some other interviewing resources as well. So we do recommend keeping Handshake high on your list for any kind of career development, because Handshake is also the main resource we use that reflects the opportunities that we have with employers. Whenever they reach out to us, we do have an employer relations team that closely vets those opportunities, then posts them directly to our site. So we are at the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you all for attending. I hope this was helpful. Once again, we will be sending you a copy of this recording in the PowerPoint within 2 business days, so you can go back and review the content. And I can take probably another minute or so. I can take any last minute questions or comments. And if you need to jump, thank you again for taking some time out of your day today, and hope you are walking away with some techniques to consider. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. And thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Charmaine, for attending. Amanda, thank you so much. Sometimes it just takes, hearing some of these concepts and giving yourself a pause. A lot of the information is not earth-shattering, but it's just the act of taking a step away, right? And thinking about this that can be very helpful for folks. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate you attending. All right. Well, I don't see any questions coming in. So please do schedule an appointment with us if we can be of further assistance. And hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope it's stress-free for the rest of your Monday. And again, we'll be sending this follow-up recording, and everyone take care.